Well, hi, everybody. Hi again. This is Edward here. I've got a new new lesson coming up here pretty soon. I'll be putting it together and uploading it to YouTube within the next day or so. But before I do, I thought I'd come in and give you a quick update on what we are talking about last week. Now, last week, if you remember, we were talking about transitive verbs and how to group them into a sentence. And during that time, I told you that you should keep the subject and the verb together. Remember, subject, verb. He goes to Chicago. He lives in Tokyo. And I very carefully and made a very distinct stop every time I read one of the sample sentences that I provided with you, every one of the 50 sample sentences that I gave you. But then afterwards, I talked with one Edward Eigo listener or viewer who is a very good English speaker. And she said to me, is it really necessary to make that long of a pause between the verb and the other part of the sentence? And of course, no. And we talked about it a little bit, and I don't know if I explained it to her very well, and evidently I didn't explain it to you very well last week, so I'll explain it here. First of all, let me change over to a page of our samples. Now, as you can see here, we have subject plus intransitive verb plus other stuff with these 6 example sentences. And when I was reading these last week, I would read them like, they ran towards the street. He sang all day. The cat jumped high. The birds flew over our heads. They smiled at each other. My friend moved to Chicago. Now, I want to let you know, before you think that that's the way you have to speak English, that I did that intentionally for my Japanese students of English. Many times Japanese people, when they study English, they study vocabulary, one word, one word, one word. And sometimes people will say, they ran towards the street, or he sang all day. So what I'm trying to get such elementary students to understand is the subject and verb have to come together in such a sentence. So that is why I stressed they ran towards the street. Of course, native speakers don't speak that way where they leave such a big space between the verb and the rest of the sentence. For example, let me read this native speaker style. They ran towards the street. He sang all day. The cat jumped high. The birds flew over our heads. They smiled at each other. My friend moved to Chicago. Now, that's the way a native speaker might say it, and probably even quicker, or people who are very advanced speakers of English will talk that way. But even so, could you catch it? Since I told you that there has to be some kind of slight break between the verb and the rest of the sentence, could you catch that with my intonation or with my rhythm or even a very slight pause? I know when I speak, it feels like a break between the verb and the rest of the sentence. I don't know if it's a pause, intonation, or something like that, or the rhythm of how I speak, but there is a slight, distinct separation between the verb and the rest of the sentence. Listen again. Try to catch it. I'll say it, read it quickly again. Try to catch that break. They ran towards the street. He sang all day. The cat jumped high. The birds flew over our heads. They smiled at each other. My friend moved to Chicago. Could you catch it? This kind of grouping, even though it's very slight and the separation may be almost, if you're not an advanced speaker, you might not be able to hear it, but it is a very important point about how to speak and how to hear English. So this class that I'm doing here is basically for my students, and many of them have this trouble with grouping, and so I'll be making a big pause where they're supposed to group. But that doesn't mean you have to change your English to put long pauses into your sentences. All right? So that's going to be it for now. I wanted to tell everybody about this to make sure that you're not mimicking my very slow and distinct, careful way of speaking. In fact, I think when I have a chance, I'm going to redo the file that has the practice of the 50 transitive verbs. I'm going to do a slow style. I'm going to keep the slow style up there, and I'm going to also make a new video that will show faster reading, and that way you'll be able to practice and hear more closely to how a native speaker speaks. But as I said, I've got a new video coming up on transitive verbs, and it's pretty interesting. As I looked into transitive verbs, I found out that it's a big subject, and if I tried to cover it all, my video might take a couple of days. And so we're going to do basic transitive verb rules, and that'll be coming in a couple of hours, so be ready for it. Okay, so see you again in a few minutes, in a few hours.